Black bulk of buildings like a vanishing of hope within the bustle of the capital, and now itself a vanishing, a grace of light, of unaccustomed emptiness, as though a bomb site proved benign, as though reprieve were suddenly predestined. Here it was I visited an AIDS ward in a time of terror, all there seeming doomed as by a capital crime, and that one standing pallid, black-moustached, in carpet slippers, phoning a Brighton library about a book that he, being whisked from home, could not now easily return. The second poem is called Two Friends Who Died of AIDS. The first one is actually Michael Vyner, who used to run the London Sinfonietta. And I've subtitled it Aldeburgh. I should say that Stephen Toms was a great Aldeburgh devotee and is actually buried in the churchyard at Aldeburgh, parish church. Part one is just called MV. The last time I saw you alive, it was in the music-loving Aldeburgh. You walked in gingerly, if courtly fashion, helped by your friend along the front. We met just by the old Moot Hall, and the voice with which you greeted me had risen sharply in pitch, an old man's fatuous giggle. Part two is headed ST. And when we'd finally parted, you still in the land of the more or less hail, I went down to the beach, that day of June and changeable weather, and a rainbow stood on the extremities of vision, a giant arch that spoke of another world, tangential. It was the rainbow of your mortality. Then the next one, ST in the Royal Free. I didn't kiss a dying friend sequestered in a contagious ward for fear of being infected, having to fly Chicagowards the very next day. And since that time, I have a sense beyond the grave, as I go about my day, of a mildly, justifiably contemptuous hiss. In Memoriam, Stephen Toms. It riled me that a mourner at the grave beside your own saw fit to chew his gum while our group stood respectfully tight-lipped as Flagstad rose on waves of Wagner Lieder from the ghetto blaster by your pristine stone. It wouldn't have bothered you, the lad was spry, nor would that baby bawling through your funeral some months before, for you were all for life, and if for death, you wanted most of all this cemetery by the sea, where yards away, revered B. Britain, Piers, I. Holst, compose a winter peaceful Aldeburgh Valhalla. Some ordnance read, your friend the Lady Vicar says a prayer for you and bids us live our lives. This is called The Great Fear, from the estate of Stephen Toms, and it refers to some other friends of ours. The art card, hand-delivered, or rather by college mail, slips out of the pile that has been passed to me and includes so many written by myself, the pictures of my travels. The lucidist communication, neat and to the point, no crossings out, one shaft of irony, a campy salutation. It is an invitation to dine with him, that's Nicky, at New College on Thursday, and he hopes that Kitty may be there. Nicky I barely knew, and it is certain he cannot have foreseen my acquiring of his script, my self-appointed, as with this, custodianship of his fate. Grr, and equally have had no inkling of the fatefulness of what he sat there writing. 3 names, his own and Stephen, our dressee, and Kitty, whom I knew a little and was fond of, who was back then, in student days, as later, a dress designer, all destined to succumb to AIDS, most dreaded acronym. Nicky among the very first. Memorial to Stephen Toms, 1954 to 98. I was startled to see your living likeness across the restaurant floor, 25 years on, just sitting there, much as you would have been had you been spared the terrible subtraction. It seems hardly fair that I've had that quarter century of being, while you've been forced to pursue insentience, nullity. You who had such appetite for life, such zest and geniality, and might have glowed over there like this, a little bit older looking, but otherwise startlingly to the life. Now my Elegy for Bayan Northcott, which is fairly recent, of course. He died in January 2023. Death of a Critic, in memoriam Bayan Northcott. Impossibility of losing you, that sumptuous intellect, I'd quietly presumed would be forever there. Consultable, high-toned you always were, but affable, most greatly conversational, especially in the old days of the telephone, when chats went on for many an hour, and every subject under the sun, the musical sun, was meat and drink to us. I rove back now for anecdote, the telling detail, but sympathetic of course, that would give you as you were, or rather as you seemed to be. Away from the South Bank, the Wigmore Hall, one wouldn't find you, unless invited to your home, that riverside eyrie of yours where you dwelt at the heart of your bachelor's family. Your marvellous artist mother, invisibly presiding. Your father, who outlived her, quite fascinating for being so much the verbal opposite of you and practically never saying a word. From this untroubled vantage, you poured out notes for records, programme notes, reviews. Their word counts carefully logged. You weighed every word. And your musical notes becoming the major thing, your slow beginning oeuvre. At last it reached the stage, the glorious stage of a prom performance. And who'd have thought, in those years of endless crafting of an oboe sonata, you'd be the author of that concerto for orchestra. I'm pained to think of that moment on the Chiswick street, when you, who hardly ventured out these days, you lived, you told me, almost entirely in your head, collapsed, your heart, and into the hands of strangers. You, who always like to get back home without delay, Glyndebourne trips, they come to me now, which you couldn't avoid, would make you curse train travel. And how can I forget that time at the Angel Islington? So here's an anecdote. In the wintry storm, and late on a reveller's weekend night, but I don't recall the concert we'd have been to, when I managed, against the odds, as they seemed so woe-inducingly to you, to hail a taxi, and we bundled ourselves in, and all was suddenly possible again, and your face shone, Bayan, and I've never seen a man so grateful. Finally, a poem that's really just about music and not death. Kilburn Park tube station, one weekday afternoon. And again I hear it, Für Elisa, that archetypal, one might almost say, piano piece by Beethoven, in a sprinkle, obscured yet audible. Obscured then audible on the escalator as I descend. But I ascend. I'm back in the music room in the comfortable house of a long-lost childhood friend. He played quite well, I tried to. The piece unlocked the secrets of another world. We never asked who she might be. I'm still intrigued by the way this music multiplies its meanings and opens up the world. Down in this netherworld of London lateness and impingingness, it's suddenly perpetual day. Thank you.